Sup, Stupendous Horrendous here, but you can call me Joe right now because this is Joe talking. Before we get into the X-Men talk, I have an important disclaimer. This video was not originally for public viewing. I did decide I wanted to post it publicly during the writing process because I think I am occasionally very funny, and I also have some moderately good insights, but when I initially started it, it was specifically intended as a primer for someone I was in a relationship with. He wanted to get into comics, and I wanted him to be able to start with the good stuff. Whenever I say you in the video, that's who I'm talking to. However, things have changed. This wonderful person is no longer interested in comics, nor is he in a relationship with me anymore. So this video has more or less lost its initial purpose. However, I still finished it, even though I started it in late 2024, and the first half is much lower quality than my best hidden gems I read in 2025 video. There are large sections with black screen because I didn't think I'd need to record my face for that part, but there was no image to put over what I had to say, so the screen was just nothing. So that sucks. But because I still think I made some good jokes and some good insights, I have decided to upload this thing, though in a very edited form. I'm removing as much of the lovey-dovey stuff as I can, as well as making a few edits to try to make the video a little bit more digestible. When an edit is big enough that it needs an explanation, you'll see me again to tell you what the deal is. So I hope you'll stick around, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you for continuing. Welcome to your primer on the early X-Men comics. As I've indicated to you in the past, the best place to start reading X-Men is with Chris Claremont's iconic 16-year run, kickstarted by Len Wein's Giant Size X-Men #1, which served as a prelude and a pretty damn good comic in its own right. Though, of course, neither Wein nor Claremont created X-Men. The X-Men were created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, just like the vast majority of other classic Marvel characters. By the 66th issue of the original comic, it was pretty clear it wasn't doing too well, but instead of canceling it, they just turned it into a reprint book until issue 94, after Giant Size X-Men revitalized the series. Before that, the X-Men comics were kinda shit. But there's plenty of important info in them that you kind of need to know if you're gonna move forward with reading the X-Men. So this video will serve as a bit of a primer. I'm going to go over the first 4 epic collections of the X-Men, which contain all of the 60s and early 70s material plus tertiary issues. We start, of course, with X-Men #1 and the introductions of Professor Charles Xavier and his first 4 students, Angel, Beast, Iceman, and Cyclops. They bicker and demonstrate their powers, as all Stan Lee characters do, before donning their civilian clothes to greet the new student. A Goyle? Yep, it's good old Jean Grey, and as she is introduced to her new cohorts, we learn their real names. Beast is Hank McCoy, Iceman is Bobby Drake, Angel is Warren Worthington III, and Cyclops is Slim Summers. In the same breath, Professor X dubs Jean Grey Marvel Girl because why the fuck not? Also, the X-Men are called the X-Men because of their extra power. You can't make this shit up. The X-Men proceed to hit on Jean, because Stan Lee, and she demonstrates her powers by satisfyingly embarrassing them. After that, Professor X talks about how some mutants don't have humanity's best interests at heart, followed by an immediate transition to Magneto, who sucks. Thank Christ Claremont got his hands on this guy, because at this point Magneto was just a Doctor Doom clone, a generic baddie who thought mutants should rule over humanity just because. No understandable motivations, no friendship with Charles, no tragic backstory, just a cool-ass costume with no substance underneath it. He uses his powers to fuck up a rocket launch and then takes over a military base full of nukes. After the boys ogle Jean some more, Xavier sends them all to stop Magneto, and they do, but he escapes. In the end, the X-Men shake hands with the General because the mutants weren't a metaphor for marginalized groups yet. While this issue is not substantially better than much of anything else in this run, it is one of the first X-Men comics my uncle gave me as a kid, which makes it one of the first X-Men comics I ever read. So I've got a certain nostalgic love for this comic. The same cannot be said for any of the rest of this run. The next couple issues debut more new evil mutants. In issue number 2, we get the Vanisher, who does not matter and gets his brain erased by Xavier before he developed his rule of not doing that, I guess. In issue 3, we get the more memorable and less politically correct Blob. Yeah, this is pretty offensive, but honestly, the actual explanation of his name is pretty cool.
Wait, look at that! He really did stop the shells!
They couldn't penetrate his skin! Wow! He's tossing the shells away just by expanding his chest!
Never saw anything like it! The Blob has a body like Silly Putty! He can do anything!
At least they don't call him Blob just because he's fat. Anyway, our buddy Fred J. Dukes is a disgruntled circus sideshow, and the X-Men go to try to recruit him, and he tells them to fuck off until he sees Jean. Everyone wants to fuck Jean, including the Professor. This incredibly gross subplot would be done away with by future writers, but still occasionally addressed. Anyway, things go sideways, and Blob runs away. Xavier's worried about secrecy, but can't erase his mind long distance. Why he didn't erase his mind while he was fighting the X-Men? Because I hate these comics. Blob goes back to the circus and takes it over, then leads them to invade the X-Mansion out of sheer paranoia. After a protracted and annoying fight, the Blob and his cronies tie up all the X-Men, hot, and go for Professor X. But the Professor telepathically reminds Jean that she has fucking telekinesis, and so she unties herself and the X-Men. Then they take care of the invaders, Xavier erases their memories, and Blob is sent back to his miserable life as a sideshow attraction. How fucking depressing. Issue 3 is also the first time Cyclops gets called Scott, and the first time Hank is shown to be a loquacious scholar with a genius intellect instead of the lunkhead he was in the first 2 issues. This characterization was a welcome change, and one of the reasons Beast is among my favorite X-Men. In issue 4, we get the return of Magneto and his new team founded to counter the X-Men, the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. There's Toad, who you know from the first X-Men movie, although at this point his powers were just jumping real high, no long tongue or slime spit yet. Then there's Mastermind, who can create illusions and will become very important when the Dark Phoenix saga rolls around. And then there is, of course, the Maximoff twins, Pietro and Wanda, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. One of the few things I love about this comic is the setup of their dynamics. Toad is a groveler who worships the ground Magneto walks on. Mastermind is a duplicitous, disloyal schemer. And Pietro and Wanda are reluctant villains, only serving Magneto because he saved them from a lynch mob and they feel indebted to him. This is long before the revelation that the twins are Magneto's own children, which was later undone in the name of corporate synergy, which is one of the reasons I don't view modern comics as canon, at least not most of them. In my book, the Maximoff twins are Magneto's children, and nothing can change it. But anyway, the Brotherhood invade a little South American nation called Santo Marco, with Mastermind conjuring up images of Nazi-like soldiers to intimidate the populace. This would become very ironic when Claremont redefined Magneto's character. The X-Men, of course, come in and foil Magneto's plans, but this would be far from the last battle between the two groups. In fact, they would battle again in the very next issue. And the next one. And one more. Issue 7 is the one that matters most, since the Brotherhood give Blob a knock on the head while trying to recruit him, and thus his memory returns because that's what head trauma does. He joins them for a minute, but in the end, Magneto betrays him in an attempt to kill the X-Men, and thus he just sadly trundles off to do his own thing. I feel really sorry for this character. Issue 7 is also relevant due to the introduction of the Cerebro system and the X-Men actually graduating. It doesn't really change anything though, they still be the X-Men and fight on Xavier's behalf, so I'm not sure of the point. But cool anyway, I guess. Also, Xavier puts Cyclops in charge and goes off to track down the motherfucker who took his legs, a boring alien named Lucifer. In issue 8, Hank and Bobby almost get killed by a gaggle of numbskulls, and Hank gets so mad that he quits the X-Men. Hank decides to get into wrestling, but encounters another mutant in the ring, Eunice the Untouchable, who is, in my opinion, very lame. After Eunice defeats Hank, Mastermind shows up on Magneto's behalf and tells him to go out and cause trouble to prove himself. He does just that, and Beast rejoins the X-Men to stop him. Hank builds a ray gun that makes Eunice's powers go out of control, making him unable to touch anything, including food. Under threat of starvation, he temporarily reforms and they undo the effects. This is so fucked. It's also strange that they say if he ever commits a crime again, they'll fucking permanently hit him with that ray gun, and then they kind of just forget the ray gun exists while Eunice continues to be a criminal. Great. Continuity. So I wrote that section from memory, and I completely forgot that Beast doesn't rejoin the X-Men when he's building the ray gun. You know, like, they come in, and they're like, what are you doing here? And he's like, I'm building this thing to increase Eunice's power, and he explains nothing else. So they think he's a traitor this whole time. He refuses to clear things up, and it's so annoying. It's so annoying that it almost breaks my fucking brain. This is probably the worst, not just the worst X-Men issue, this is probably the worst Jack Kirby and Stan Lee issue in general. It is so fucking bad. It's awful. In the meantime, Xavier finds Lucifer. God, what a dumb choice of name. The X-Men fight the Avengers, Xavier fights Lucifer, and the X-Men come defeat Lucifer, and they all go home. The next issue introduces the Savage Land and its Tarzan-like protector, Kazar. The Savage Land is basically a lush and tropical section of Antarctica on which prehistoric animals still live, including Kazar's pet saber-toothed tiger, Zabu. I love this little guy. Anyway, the X-Men see Kazar and Zabu fucking with some explorers on TV, so they go to investigate him, literally just because. When they get to Antarctica and discover the Savage Land, they get attacked by animals and Neanderthals. Jean gets kidnapped, thanks Stan, but the rest are saved by Kazar. After a pointless fight, thanks Stan, Kazar teams up with the X-Men to get Jean back from the Neanderthals. Kazar would go on to get his own series and guest star in a number of other Marvel books, so this is actually a reasonably important early X-Men issue. Next issue's a weird one. The Stranger arrives. He's this big old alien dude who ain't got time for anyone's shit. The Brotherhood try to recruit him, so he fucking turns Mastermind to stone. When he disappears from a fight between the Brotherhood and the X-Men, Magneto and Toad follow him into his portal, leaving only the Maximoff twins behind. And they both say, you know what, fuck this, we're reforming, we never wanted to be involved with this shit anyway. But they won't join the X-Men either. They've had enough conflict. You know, until they decide to join the Avengers. Meanwhile, the Stranger reveals his status as an alien to Magneto, covers him and Toad in goop, and takes them away to be lab specimens for his people. Yep, Magneto is gone for good, and I'm Henry Kissinger. The next 5 issues are actually pretty damn important, as the 2 story arcs within introduce 2 new major threats, the Juggernaut and the Sentinels. In issues 12 through 13, Professor X tells his students his origin story after he makes them dig a moat out of sheer panic. See, when he was a kid, his dad died in a lab explosion, and his dad's skeevy lab partner, Dr. Marco, married his mother. It is revealed he intentionally didn't save Dr. Xavier and married his widow for her money. Dr. Marco was an abusive asshole. And then his son came into the picture, and he was even worse. Young Charles's new older stepbrother, Kane, was a jealous, bullying piece of shit. And then, to make matters worse, his mom died, leaving him exclusively in the care of Dr. Marco. I remember finding this gut-wrenchingly upsetting as a kid, and, to be honest, I kinda still do now. Anyway, another lab accident happens, and Marco dies, and now both Kane and Charles are orphans. After that, Charles does well in school, learns he can read minds, loses all his hair because his brain's just too damn big, and only gets more hate from Kane. Later on, they would serve together in the Korean War, and Kane would flee gunfire into a cave. He finds a ruby, picks it up, and now he's got the magical bands of Sitarak on his wrists, and voila, the unstoppable juggernaut. And now, years later, he's coming to Xavier's school to kill him. The X-Men fight him off, but he's called unstoppable for a reason. He just keeps coming. Hell, they need to call in the Human Torch for help. Eventually, the Juggernaut is defeated when Torch flashbangs him and Angel removes his helmet, allowing Xavier to psychically subdue him. As a reward for helping them, the Torch gets his memory erased. Wow, dick move. That said, this is honestly probably my favorite Pre Claremont X-Men story. It's the one story that legit had me on my toes. Juggernaut felt like a real, actual danger to our heroes, making it all the more satisfying when they use their own cleverness and ingenuity to come out on top. Then comes the first encounter with the Sentinels. See, there's this bigot named Dr. Bolivar Trask. You know, Peter Dinklage from Days of Future Past. In the comics, he's not nearly as charming. He organizes a witch hunt and invents the Sentinels for the sole purpose of tracking and killing mutants, and protecting humans. But they turn on Trask at a press conference, abducting him and taking him back to the home of the Master Mold, a super Sentinel Trask made which prints out more Sentinels. They decide the best way to protect humans is to rule over them. I'm not a fan of how loquacious and sentient these Sentinels are. They read more like aliens than robots. They'd be perfected later on. After the X-Men rescue Charles Xavier from the Sentinels, they go to save Trask as well, despite his shittiness. Trask, for his own part, is losing his goddamn marbles over his creations turning against him, and wanting to take over humanity. He refuses to help the Master Mold make more Sentinels, and as the story goes on, really starts to see the error of his ways. Anyway, a bunch of stuff happens. I don't feel like pouring through the details, because this isn't nearly as good as the Juggernaut story. By the end, the Sentinels have been defeated, largely due to Trask's self-sacrifice. Trask's development is the only part of this story I really like, to be honest. In the next issue, Magneto has escaped back to Earth, and he defeats the X-Men and puts them in a hot air balloon. I don't know what to tell you. Also, he hypnotizes Angel's parents because that's something he can do, I guess. Talking more about this story is honestly not worth my time or yours. Next story, Hank and Bobby go on a double date and run into this tough guy named Calvin Rankin. He tries to muscle in on Hank's girl Vera and then inadvertently mimics the boy's powers. That's his name, that'll be his name, Mimic. He realizes he just met two X-Men in their civvies and he wants more of their power for himself. So he goes to the fucking X-Mansion and asks to join the team. Then, after he hangs out with them all enough to get their powers, he breaks out his own super suit. Yada yada fight scene, yada yada he kidnaps Jean, because of course he fucking does. He reveals he got his powers from a lab accident, who gives a fuck, fight happens, he loses his powers, doesn't matter how, because he'll get him back later. Next issue, Blob and Eunice team up and pretend to be X-Men and commit crimes. They're working for Lucifer, who gives a flying fuck. The X-Men go to space to fight him, and it is utterly staggering how little I care. It's also worth mentioning that Roy Thomas took over the book at this point, but unlike Avengers, it did not benefit from his presence. If anything, it got even worse. Next issue, Count Nefaria, an Avengers villain and leader of the criminal organization called the Magia, because Mafia was taken, brings together a haphazard assortment of supervillains to fight the X-Men. We're talking big names like Porcupine, Unicorn, Eel, Plant Man, Scarecrow. Yeah, Marvel has a Scarecrow too. I have no idea how they avoided that lawsuit. Anyway, none of this really matters, we all know who's gonna win anyway. And there ends the first epic collection. Next! It's worth noting that there's tons of pointless drama in these issues. Will Jean or Scott ever confess their feelings for one another? Who will quit the X-Men this issue only to return at the end? Will Angel swoop in on Jean before Scott gets his chance? LOL. Anyway, I will no longer be addressing these bits. I'm also going to cut in here and just say I'm removing most of my coverage of Epic Collection 2 because Epic Collection 2 is really boring, and there's only so many times you can hear me say, this is really boring, before that becomes really fucking boring. The only stuff you really need to know is that the X-Men fight this group called Factor 3, one of whom is Banshee, who will become an X-Men later down the line, and another of whom is a character named Changeling, who would later be adapted as Morph in X-Men the Animated Series. He's gonna matter to a story like later in the video, but not like a whole bunch. The X-Men get new costumes. They fight a character named Grotesque the Subhuman who fucking murks Professor X. Professor X is dead for a while. Also, it's like established that Professor X trained Jean Grey to be a telepath, which makes no sense. But later they redefined it as, oh, she had like a repressed mutant ability, which makes a lot more sense. But anyway, Jean Grey is a telepath now. Professor X is dead. Banshee and Changeling are going to show up down the line. That's about it. Big fight, blah blah blah. Avengers show up and they fight over a misunderstanding. Thanks for changing nothing, Roy. Magneto fake dies, everyone goes home, nothing matters, the end, next Epic Collection. Okay, so in issue 46, Juggernaut comes back and he's like, rah, rah, fuck you, where's my brother? I want to kill him. And they're like, he's dead, dude. And he doesn't believe them, so they fight. But by the end of the issue, he disappears in a contrived Deus Ex Machina. Also, the FBI tells the X-Men to split up because drama. For a few issues, the X-Men fight various baddies separately, and none of it is particularly engaging. In issue 49, they reunite to face... oh, God, this is complicated. Okay. There's a mutant named Mesmero. He's the leader of a bunch of robots pretending to be mutants called the Demi-Men. He is supposedly a follower of Magneto. Mesmero sends out some kind of signal to activate latent mutants and draw them to him. One such mutant is a young Lorna Dane, who Iceman saves from getting creamed by a truck. She snaps out of her haze and reveals she's been drawn far from home. Iceman is into her, and he takes her back to his shared apartment with Beast, where she is revealed to have been born with green hair. While the X-Men go to investigate shit, Bobby stays with Lorna, and the Demi-Men attack. Mesmero, mesmerizes Iceman, and drops to his knees in front of Lorna in exaltation, saying he's there to worship her. Kinky. Issue 50 picks up the story while giving us easily the sickest ass cover of all 60s X-Men. Mesmero takes Bobby and Lorna back to the base and activates Lorna's latent powers, which are magnetism. Mesmero reveals that she is the daughter of Magneto, declares her the queen of the mutants, and mesmerizes her to accept the role. Oh, and the X-Men are captured. More fighting, they escape, more drama, this guy shows up. Who's he? Eric the Red, that's who. You know what? I'm gonna let someone funnier than me explain this shit. Hey, sorry, lost all my daylight. For this part of the video, I stole the first section of Nikhil Clayton's video on Eric the Red. That whole video is very funny, I highly recommend it, especially if you want to know, like, specifically what happens in this fucking story, but the bullet points are Scott becomes Eric the Red and infiltrates Magneto's ranks, and then they all fight, and Magneto loses, and Lorna joins the X-Men. So yeah, Lorna's just kind of with the X-Men now. Cool! Eventually she'll take up the name Polaris, which rules, but before that she's just kind of Lorna and occasionally Magnetrix? I don't like it. In the next issue, the X-Men pointlessly fight Blastar, one of the many earth-shatteringly boring Fantastic Four villains. The issue after that begins the next big story arc, which would debut Cyclops' younger brother Alex Summers. In adaptations like X-Men Evolution, fantastic show by the way, the presence of a younger brother was a real revelation, but here it really just felt like writer Arnold Drake grasping at straws. What are we going to do next? Mysterious brother? Sure, why not? He's not even long lost. Scott and Alex greet each other as if they've been recently in touch. Anyway, Alex gets kidnapped by this fella called the Living Pharaoh who's planning some kind of sacrifice, and baby, I'm sorry, I gotta cheat again. So for this section of the video, I stole from Mary Marvelite's video on Havoc, and every time I rewatch that section of the video that I stole, I become more and more understanding of why I made that choice. This shit is so overwhelmingly complicated and barely makes any sense. In fact, screw it, it doesn't make sense. It makes no fucking sense. So basically, like, the living pharaoh and Alex have this like power link, and so living pharaoh kidnaps him, but he escapes, so he kidnaps him again. In this storyline, living pharaoh kidnaps Alex Summers twice. Fuck you, fuck off. but um but like, yeah, and then he uses Alex's powers, which are like cosmic energy manipulation, to grow super big and strong and get gray skin and become the living monolith. But they end up defeating him, and Alex is like scared of his powers, so he runs off and hides in a cave so that it doesn't kill all his friends. Yeah, I don't fucking know, man. Yeah, the only thing I really have to add to this is the introduction of Neil Adams as artist in issue 56. You may remember Neil Adams as the man who helped Denny O'Neil reinvent Green Arrow and revitalize Green Lantern. He also worked with O'Neil on his iconic Batman run, and this was before all that, but even at this point, he was still one of the absolute GOATs. Look at this! And to make it even sweeter, he stayed on the book until it stopped running new stories. So whether the following stories are okay or terrible, at least they'll be fucking gorgeous to look at. Anyway, while Alex is hiding in a cave, Lorna is abducted by the Sentinels. That's right, they're back, baby, and Christ do they look better. Anyway, they abduct Alex too. The Sentinels have a new controller, Larry Trask, son of their deceased creator, Bolivar. Trask is also working with a federal judge named Chalmers to stir up anti-mutant paranoia. Iceman ends up captured and learns that Alex has been forced into a power-controlling suit and renamed Havoc by Trask. For some reason, Alex would keep the name given to him by a genocidal bigot who kidnapped him, but whatevs. Anyway, a whole bunch of other mutants are captured, including the X-Men and some of their enemies, such as the Living Monolith and Mesmero. This is also how Mesmero finds out the Magneto that he was following was a robot, which is only barely explained years later in a Captain America comic. Anyway, the judge starts wondering if his and Trask's actions are just, and he argues with Trask. When Trask orders the Sentinels to kill all the mutants, the judge rips off his medallion. Huh? This medallion, with various unexplained powers, which is sloppily explained to be one his father made him swear never to remove. Well, it turned out that the medallion hid Larry Trask's status as a mutant, so now that it's gone, the Sentinels are after him. This is definitely better than when the Sentinels turned on his father for no reason, but it also feels sorta contrived. Also, even before the Sentinels start menacing him, he still has a sort of change of heart when his medallion is removed. It's not done very well. But what is done well is, after a long fight, Cyclops outlogics the Sentinel by explaining that since humans are results of mutation, protecting humans from mutants is an oxymoron. And so...
I must leave now. To that place where leads the siren call of logic. We must seek out the source of mutant-inducing radiation, though our quest leads us to the most inaccessible place of all, to the very heart of the raging sun itself.
That is actually really clever. Good on you, Roy. Whoops! Turns out Adams did most of the plotting, so Roy can't really be credited for this. And so they fly to the sun and are incinerated. God, that's gorgeous. As the issue ends, Cyclops recovers Havoc's unconscious body from some wreckage, long story, and the last 3 panels set up him taking Alex to a doctor, one which they will soon learn is up to no good. I have to say, I actually really like this story. Neil Adams' art and plot are both pretty damn good, and while Roy Thomas's dialogue is kind of grating, it's not nearly as bad as his previous X-Men work. Maybe the art was so dazzling that it made the writing look good by proxy, but this is definitely the best Pre Claremont X-Men story since the first appearance of the Juggernaut. It's always cool to see our heroes engaged in actual clever problem solving instead of just punching the bad guys a whole bunch. Issue 60, we're introduced to Dr. Carl Lycos, aka Sauron, and oh baby, are you in for a trip. So the issue starts with the X-Men saying bye-bye to the judge who had a change of heart and helped them out, and going to Dr. Lycos, who is believed to be a former colleague of Professor Xavier. Also, Lorna officially joins the team because apparently, despite being in their orbit for like the last 10 issues or so, she wasn't officially a member of the team, so yeah, I don't know. Anyway, Scott and Jean leave Alex in Lycos' care, and while they go to play in the danger room, Lycos monologues about his past. When he was just a boy,
When I was a boy,
he was helping his father, an explorer's guide explorers through Tierra del Fuego. Specifically, this fella named Anderson and his daughter Tanya. Tanya went missing, and Carl found her being attacked by pterodons. As he saves her, he is bitten, and given the ability to absorb the life force of other beings. He can't stop himself. Eventually, his dad dies, and Anderson takes him in as recompense for saving Tanya. He falls in love with Tanya, of course, and stops reading Tolkien to become a doctor like she wants. But those plans end up taking a back seat to his own thirst for energy. He thinks mutant energy will cure him, which brings us back to the present and his attempts to drain Alex. But instead of curing him, it transforms him. And I'm just gonna fucking read this page.
I can bear no more. But even breaking contact does not stop the pain. The pain of surging muscles where once there were none. Fierce talons of pain that scrape my back, bringing forth leathery wings. My body, my face, my very soul, they are changed, transformed, filled with bursting, billowing power. Power for good, or power for evil. And I choose evil. An evil so great, so monumental, that only one name in the annals of literature will contain it. The name of Tolkien's ultimate villain, that dark lord who personified evil, who was truly evil incarnate. The name of Sauron!
Jesus Christ, I knew this Sauron had the same name as the Lord of the Rings. I didn't know he named himself after that character in universe. This is the most impressive nerd move I have ever seen in a mainstream comic. Anyway, Sauron starts stealing stuff, and Angel gets mad that his wings make him a suspect in the news, so he dresses up in his classic and much cooler Avenging Angel costume and goes to track down Sauron. It's worth noting that in the Origins backup stories, which I haven't talked about since they're sort of worthless, it's revealed that Warren was acting as a vigilante called the Avenging Angel before joining the X-Men. The X-Men follow, and a fight ensues, but they all start hallucinating after looking into Sauron's eyes. After more fighting, Sauron realizes he's transforming back into Lycos, so he hypnotizes Angel into carrying him back to his lab. Whoops! Tanya's there, and her dad, and the X-Men! Everyone! Oh hey, Alex seems to be doing better. The X-Men take Alex back home to find Lorna taking care of the dazed Angel, and when they mention Lycos' name, he freaks out. The X-Men decide to look into Lycos a little more, and Iceman is a possessive creep towards Lorna. Gross, I hate that. Anyway, as Lorna does her research, Lycos creeps up on her and saps her essence while thanking her for musing aloud that she's a mutant. Hey Roy, cheekily mentioning plot contrivances in the dialogue doesn't make them any less contrived. Anyway, he turns back into Sauron and goes after Tanya and her daddy, who, by the way, won't let them get married. The X-Men arrive, and Sauron leaves after realizing how out of control he is. He goes to his dad's old cabin and reverts to his human form to die in the cold, but Tanya tracks him down somehow. How many days later is this? Does Tanya have Quicksilver on speed dial? Anyway, Lycos is scared of hurting her, so he jumps off a cliff and dies. Of course, he's not really dead. He'll show up and menace the X-Men again later down the line, but for now, he's dead. In the next issue, after Angel has recovered, he follows the X-Men's trail to Tierra del Fuego and finds out they're searching for Lycos' body. When he flies up to find them, some pterodons attack him and he falls into a chasm, which is actually a tunnel leading to the Savage Land. Contrived, but it explains why there are pterodons in Tierra del Fuego in the first place. His unconscious body is found by a froggy dude named Amphibious and the man he calls Master. Who's he? Meanwhile, the X-Men find big old dinos and run into our old friend Kazar. Kazar tells them to be quiet, Iceman mouths off, and Kazar backhands him. Immensely satisfying. Anyway, after showing the X-Men who's boss, he goes to spy on his swamp-dwelling enemies, led by a new character. Fighting happens. Meanwhile, the man only known as the Creator revives Angel, even gives him the best costume he's had so far. As the Creator greets Angel, the guy Kazar attacked runs in and alerts the Creator to the X-Men's presence. Meanwhile, the X-Men make their way to the Creator's location, running into various obstacles. Kazar taking care of this dweeb is funny. Angel learns that the man who saved him is gathering mutants in the Savage Land, rescuing them from the dangers their fellow tribesmen pose. Angel buys this and goes to call the X-Men off while the Creator laughs to his minions and reveals his helmet. That's right, baby! Magneto's back, the real one, and we get to see his face for the first time. Neato! And it turns out the mutants he's been gathering are actually mutates, tribesmen he himself has genetically altered. So Angel goes to tell the X-Men to back off, and I'll give you time to guess what ends up happening. If you guess that they fight, you win! Then the mutates show up, more fighting. Christ, this is boring. If not for the artwork, this would be fucking unbearable. Angel realizes he's been had and goes after the Creator, at which point he learns the whole truth. Magneto explains how he survived, and knowing Neil Adams actually genuinely believed in Hollow Earth theory makes this whole thing really funny to me. Anyway, Magneto reveals Lorelei, his newest mutate, who can ensnare men's minds. While the boys are mesmerized, Jean dukes it out with Magneto and in a pretty smart move, telekinetically opens Scott's visor to blow up some necessary machinery Magneto made, and I forgot what it does. The ending feels like it's trying and failing to be deep. Issue 64 introduces Shiro Yoshida, aka Sunfire, as a Japanese mutant being manipulated by his nationalist uncle into committing acts of terrorism against America, mainly as retaliation for Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He has a change of heart after his uncle murders his diplomat father. It's a real Uncle Ben, great power, great responsibility moment. Sunfire would go on to join the X-Men on and off. Issue 65 is something really special. Instead of Roy Thomas writing it, a new guest writer was brought in. A fellow by the name of Dennis Joseph O'Neill pens this issue in his very first collaboration with the man he would later tell classic Batman, Green Lantern, and Green Arrow stories with. As the issue begins, the X-Men arrive back at the mansion to cool off after all these adventures, only to find Alex and Lorna suited up and urgently telling them to do the same. After a little more pointless bickering, probably out of sheer contractual obligation at this point, Havoc briefs the X-Men on the Xenox, a despotic alien species with their sights set on the Earth, who plan on bringing their portable planet to fuck up the tides. How do Alex and Lorna know about this? Well, Professor X told them. That's right, in his one-issue writing X-Men, O'Neill left his mark by bringing good old Chucky back from the dead. It turns out that the Professor X they witnessed die was Factor 3 member Changeling, who came to the Professor looking for redemption in the face of his own illness and oncoming death. Professor X charged him with taking on his appearance and dying as him while he prepared against the invasion in seclusion. Also, Jean knew but wasn't allowed to tell. This feels like a violation of trust, but don't worry, nobody treats it that way. Anyway, these bonkers-ass sentences are said.
Time to prepare a counterattack. Concentrate. I shall mentally erase your fatigue, and for the next few hours, you shall train as you have never trained before.
So they do. So while the X-Men fight the Znox in person, Professor Xavier mind links with most of the people on the planet and sends a massive, love wave at the Znox, I guess? And they don't really know how to handle it, so they kill themselves. I don't know, man. In the final issue, before the book's semi-cancellation, the X-Men fight the Hulk. Oh, fuck off. 3 more comics are in this epic collection, Kazar issues 2 and 3, and Marvel Tales number 30, but none of these seem to matter, at least not to me. And that's the end of X-Men printing original material until Claremont. But there are still more X-Men stories, although told in other comics. Those are collected in the 4th epic collection. The first comic in this collection is Amazing Spider-Man number 92, and it involves a fight between Spidey and Iceman. Seems inconsequential to me. Next is Incredible Hulk number 150. Hulk, as usual, is being hounded by the military, and after he gets away, he muses on his lost love, Jarella. See, there was a period of time Hulk spent in the microverse, or I guess as the MCU would call it, the quantum realm. And while there, he fell in love with this subatomic princess named Jarella. Have I read these comics? No. Will I read these comics? Probably not. But it matters because the lovesick Hulk comes across a group of bikers chasing down a female driver with green hair. Could it be Jarella? No, it's Lorna. She's come to the Southwest to find Alex, who left the X-Men after a scuffle with Bobby that almost killed the icy incel. Anyway, Hulk makes quick work of the bikers to save his beloved Jarella, of course, while Lorna gets away, finds Alex, and asks him to come back. Unfortunately, Hulk arrives and grabs Lorna. However, when he realizes Lorna isn't Jarella, a poorly timed army car comes by and Hulk thinks it's a setup. He gets mad and threatens Lorna, then Alex arrives in his Havoc costume. Fight time! At least the art is pretty good. Herb Trimpe had a long run on the Hulk, and I can see why. I also like that Alex doesn't seem as meat-headed as a lot of the characters felt when written by Lee or Thomas, and I appreciate how much breezier and less wordy a read this is. Probably because this is written by Archie Goodwin, who's a much better writer. Alex doesn't want to fight the Hulk. He actually seems compassionate. His number one concern is Lorna's safety, and when the Hulk is no longer a threat to her, he lets up. He also learns how to moderate his powers a little better in this issue, giving him the courage to rejoin the X-Men. It's honestly a nice little arc for him. Hell, I guess I really like this comic. Nice! The next story comprises issues 11 through 13 of an anthology comic called Amazing Adventures, which for 7 issues would star our old beastly buddy Hank McCoy. But he looks a little different this time. Hell yeah, Beast is beasted out, and I love it. This storyline is sort of hit and miss, though. The first issue is by Jerry Conway, who's responsible for one of the best and most iconic Spider-Man runs of all time. The rest are by Steve Englehart, who's written some good stuff and some not-so-good stuff. And that pretty much sums up his issues of Amazing Adventures. Issue 12 is good stuff. Issue 13 is not-so-good stuff. And that trend would continue for issues 14 through 16 as well. Let's start with issue 11. Beast leaves the X-Men to work somewhere called the Brand Corporation, and with their resources, synthesizes a hormone that can catalyze mutation. Why? Because management wanted him to be beastly and needed a reason. I mean, hey, they were right that it'd be cool. Anyway, after he creates it, he goes to report his findings to his boss, but then he overhears his rival coworker Maddox talking on the phone to some fellow spies about spying and shit. Hank knows that he needs to stop the spy shit that's going down, so he gobbles up that formula, planning on drinking the antidote when he gets back. But the antidote won't work after an hour, and he takes over an hour, so whoopsie. He's real mad that he's a permanent beast now, so he goes to kill Maddox. Thankfully, he comes to his senses and runs off. In the epilogue, Maddox is instead killed by the spy he was talking to on the phone, revealed to be his assistant and Hank's love interest, Linda Donaldson. The next issue has some sick-ass art from Tom Sutton. Professor X tries to reach out and help, but Beast tells him to fuck off and steals costume supplies instead. He creates a wax mask, gloves, and feet, and puts on a painful back brace. He is then able to pass for his human-looking self. Then Tony Stark shows up with his fiancée, Mary Ann Rogers, who I have never heard of in my entire life. Linda comes by and asks Hank to lunch, but he's too busy working on a cure. When she leaves, Mary Ann says there's something evil about Linda, and tells Hank to watch out. Hank, way too invested in this fleeting romance, gets real mad and decides that he'll do lunch with Linda after all. After he leaves, Mary Ann and Tony talk about her fucking ESP abilities and how Iron Man will get on the case right away. What the fuck? Iron Man was about to get married to a fucking psychic and nobody talks about it. Nobody remembers. How does nobody remember this? Anyway, after lunch and more work, Hank goes out exercising to unwind when Iron Man shows up. I bet you can't guess what happens! Of course, they have a stupid misunderstanding and fight, and Beast eventually kills Iron Man. At least that's what he thinks. Instead, he actually just stood still for a while and then ran off. Though he and Iron Man did fight a little, it turns out that a large portion of that fight was put in Beast's head by Mastermind, heading up the new Brotherhood with Eunice and Blob. Yeah, that's a pretty unimpressive lineup, not gonna lie. I like Blob and Mastermind, but they are just not cool enough to carry a team where the only other member is fucking Eunice. Anyway, they chase Beast down and incapacitate him. Mastermind sells him on the whole mutant supremacy bit, because apparently Beast doesn't remember these guys. See what I mean about issue 13 not being so good? And they take him to their new base, a fucking carnival. That seems in poor taste. Beast actually doesn't remember much of anything. I guess Mastermind did a real number on him. Meanwhile, Washington has sent a Captain Buzz Baxter to deal with the Brand Corp's Beast situation, and he brings his wife, Patsy Walker, whose history is fucking wild. So, Patsy was a character created for Timely Comics in 1944, and she had appeared on and off in various romance and comedy titles for the previous 2.5 decades. But this would be the first point that she would actually be implemented into the Marvel Universe. I guess Steve Englehart really liked her, because later on he ended up turning her into her own superhero, Hellcat. For now, though, she's just Captain Baxter's wife, and wow, this story is losing me bad. My mind grows number by the second. Buzz and Patsy are looking for Hank because they think this Beast fella may have done something to him. They go to his apartment and there's this mystery woman getting all sad about the idea of Hank being with Patsy, even though she's obviously with Buzz, idiot. Now, the Brotherhood, mind you, are getting Beast to rob a mansion for them. How the mighty have fallen. Under Magneto, these guys were trying to conquer the world. Under Mastermind, they're petty thieves. After Beast steals the diamond and they get back to the carnival, Beast regains his memory and fights the Brotherhood. After dispatching Eunice and Blob in a hilarious way, he finds Mastermind and defeats him in a way I don't particularly feel comfortable showing on screen, because I think the visual language used by the artist subtextually portrays something really bad. And then he leaves. We now stray away from Beast's story for an issue of Marvel Team-Up featuring Spider-Man and the X-Men. Wait. Don't tell me they have a pointless fight, right? You bet your ass they do. After that, they fight Morbius. God, I don't care. Okay, now we're back to Beast with Amazing Adventures number 14. Beast realizes he never killed Iron Man and goes to talk to him in the middle of a weapons test, and Tony's like, "Bro, fuck off, this is not the time!" At least they're a little more cordial with each other this time. In fact, he calls the guards off and shakes Hank's hand. Nice! Progress! This is already miles better than the last issue. Here's hoping that garbage was a fluke. It seems so, because I actually really like Beast's inner monologue in this issue. He's showing the good humor I'd expect from good old Hank McCoy. But then a whole clusterfuck of stressful things happen that just shut my brain right down. Whoops. Basically, he fights Quasimodo, gets injured, and finds out there may be more afoot here than meets the eye. After his injury, Beast ends up at the door of Patsy Walker, who, instead of telling her asshole husband, binds Beast wounds and lets him heal. Also, Beast talks in his sleep, so now Patsy knows he's Hank McCoy, and they have a chat about it off-panel. Meanwhile, Angel gets particularly worried about Hank and goes to find out what the hell is going on. Around that same time, Beast is going back to his apartment when the Griffin attacks. Fight happens, Hank and Warren are reunited. Meanwhile, that traitorous bitch, Linda, is having a chat with her boss, the leader of a group called the Secret Empire. She's mad that they keep sending supervillains to interfere with her more soft-touch approach. Then Griffin flies in her window, and she loses her shit.
Is the whole world gone crazy? Am I the only one around here who gives a shit about the rules?
Anyway, more shit happens. Griffin fights Beast and Angel again. They beat his ass, and Angel is reassured that Beast is doing okay. While he heads back to explain the situation to the X-Men, Hank runs into the mysterious girl who's been stalking him, Vera! Who? Okay, so she's this chick Beast was dating in the X-Men comics. She's not memorable, she's had a total of 32 appearances in the 6 decades since her creation, but right now she's important, I guess. Next issue, Hank and Vera are hitchhiking, in medias res, gotta love it. Anyway, they get picked up by this car full of buddies going to a superhero-themed Halloween parade. Buddies by the names of Steve, Jerry, Len, and Len's wife Glynis. You cheeky little buggers. Len Wein would then go on to continue this subplot in Justice League 104, with Conway finishing the thread in Thor 207. Gotta love a completely unsanctioned intercompany crossover. I hope the leadership at Marvel and DC saw the humor in it. Anyway, Hank and Vera get in the car and they all drive off while Juggernaut is in another dimension getting an exposition dump, and then he's dumped into the Halloween parade. Steve writes Glynis saying Marvel doesn't pay Steve enough, which is such an audacious troll that I honestly can't believe it. And then Vera nags Hank about how the world will end if they don't get to Canada within a week. Then Juggernaut shows up wanting to kill Hank, but he gets spirited away again for some reason. Maybe they're gonna give him another exposition dump, but they're sparing us this time. It gives Hank enough time to send Vera back to the hotel, take his fake skin off, and begin the hunt for Juggernaut. Juggy reappears and they have a pretty cool and genuinely tense fight. Beast doesn't win, but he is able to get away and get back in his skin. He goes to the Marvel Writers' Party to blend in, but Juggy tracks his aura and busts in. Beast wins by catching Juggernaut off guard and removing his helmet, thus taking away his power. And this is where the story loses me. His helmet is not the source of his power. The source is the bands on his arms. The helmet is just to guard him from mental attacks, and since Beast doesn't have telepathy, this should do nothing for his chances. But apparently Englehart didn't know any of that shit because removing his helmet actually dooms Juggernaut. They have a little bit more cool fighting, but Juggernaut ages super fast because of his time in the other dimension and then dies. Oh yeah, that'll stick. While the partiers leave, Beast stands alone on a hilltop, feeling guilty. I guess he just forgot about Vera, but who can blame him? The final issue of Amazing Adventures dedicated to Beast has a delightfully meta beginning, as Beast tells the audience he's being removed from the title, and he wants to tell his full origin story before getting the boot. But we don't see it in the Epic Collection because it apparently just reprinted backup stories from X-Men. Again, I didn't talk about those backup stories because I didn't care and they weren't of much substance. Anyway, all we get in this epic is the first page, which is funny, and the last page, which kind of made me feel like crying. You might be wondering, what the hell? What about Vera and Linda and the Secret Empire? Luckily, those dangling threads would be tied up in other comics collected in this epic. Ultimately, I don't know if I recommend these Beast comics or not. Some of what's here is really, really good, and some of it well, that was way more graphic than I needed to go. I mean, ultimately, it's up to you. The next issue collected is Incredible Hulk number 161, which features Beast and wraps up the plot thread of Hank and Vera going to Canada to save the world or some shit. The actual resolution is sort of interesting. It turns out Vera has been helping Mimic, ironic considering how they met, whose powers have grown more dangerous. At this point, he doesn't just mimic powers, he absorbs them, along with the life forces of the people he's absorbing from. That's right, Rogue is trans and Mimic is her dead name. I'm so sorry. Anyway, the point is that his power kills people now, and he doesn't even have to be touching them to do so. To make matters worse, the reach of his power is expanding and will ultimately lead to the deaths of everyone on Earth if he doesn't get cured. Vera brought Hank because of his expertise in mutation. Meanwhile, the Hulk is feeling weaker because he's in Mimic's range. Apparently, that's why Vera and Hank aren't affected by Mimic's powers since he's been getting more than enough of a meal from the Hulk. Anyway, Hulk is angry that he's feeling weaker and sicker, so he follows the sick feeling to the source, hoping to smash it. He comes in just as Hank has Mimic in a contraption meant to take away his powers, and then there is, of course, a fight. But Mimic jumps in and sacrifices himself by absorbing all of the Hulk's gamma radiation, which kills him. His reason for self-sacrificing is literally just he doesn't know if the cure will work, and it's better to not chance that it doesn't. Sort of out of nowhere concern, but okay. At the end, the Hulk runs away with no memory of any of this shit, while Hank comforts Vera. Pretty decent story, I think. Nothing mind-blowing, and you just know Mimic will eventually come back, but such is comics. The next story takes place in Avengers numbers 110 and 111, and it's basically just a fight between the Avengers and Magneto, and the X-Men are just kind of there. It doesn't really matter besides setting up that Angel is missing and Magneto is not responsible despite wearing his costume, which is such a weird image. After that is Incredible Hulk number 172, in which we see the return of the Juggernaut. What? I thought he was doomed! Anyway, this story sees Hulk captured by the military, but not Ross this time. At this point, Ross seems to be a more even-handed, benevolent character, which is very surreal to see. No, the guy running the show currently is Colonel Armbruster, and he gets miffed when the White House sends a friend of Banner's named Dr. Corbeau to help with the issue that is the Hulk. He proposes to use a sloppily introduced dimensional portal to transport the Hulk to Limbo as they work on a cure. But when they try, they instead bring Juggernaut out of Limbo. So how did he survive the whole hyper-aging thing? Well, to writer Jenny Blake Isabella's credit, she actually does explain it. See, the consciousness of Limbo needed to get rid of a germ, so it said it would give Juggernaut his youth and life back in exchange for his powers, which is supposed to help somehow. But he was pulled out of Limbo too soon, so he got his youth back, but also kept his powers. It's an explanation, but it's a pretty ridiculous and contrived one for sure. Anyway, they bust out of captivity, but Hulk turns against Juggy when he starts menacing some civilians, and they fight. Hulk defeats Juggernaut by swinging him so hard that his helmet falls off, which I remind you should do fuck all, and throwing him against a mountain in this hilarious panel. As Hulk trundles off, the X-Men conveniently show up while trying to find Alex and Lorna to help them look for Angel, and they fuck Juggy up real good. This issue definitely wasn't anything special, but it was perfectly serviceable as a reintroduction to the Juggernaut. And now we get the Secret Empire storyline taking place in Captain America issues 172 to 175. Multiple plot threads are wrapped up in this story, from Beast and his deceptive love interest Linda, to the disappearance of Angel discussed in the previous Avengers and Hulk issues. I'm not going to go too deep into this story because it's one of the most iconic and definitive Captain America stories of all time, and it's better off just being read. But it is relevant to the X-Men. In fact, they're so prevalent that it could almost be considered a crossover. The crux of it is that the Secret Empire, which Linda had been working for, has been abducting mutants and hooking them up to this brain-siphoning machine. So, Professor Xavier, Cyclops, and Jean seek out Captain America and Falcon for help. This is particularly because the Secret Empire had been causing trouble for them as well. Do I need to tell you that they win? Well, the X-Men do. Captain America loses, though. He suffers a crippling blow to his entire worldview and identity. How? You'll have to read it to find out. But I gotta say, of the Steve Englehart stuff I've read, this is definitely his finest work. Fantastic story. Next we get Marvel Team Up number 23, in which Iceman and Human Torch fight over a misunderstanding before teaming up to fight some dude called Equinox. Worthless. Next we've got issues 15 through 16 of Defenders, which provide a huge turning point for Magneto. See, since Professor X has sent the X-Men on a secret mission, one we learn more about in Giant Size X-Men number 1, he's got nobody to help him when he finds out that Magneto's up to his old tricks. So he reaches out to the Defenders, and they all go to Magneto and the Brotherhood's little cave to stop whatever he's planning. That whatever turns out to be the creation of Alpha, the ultimate mutant. After trapping the Defenders and leaving them behind, Magneto takes Alpha and the rest of the Brotherhood to the UN to take another stab at world domination. However, the initially Neanderthalic Alpha gradually develops into this big brain Adonis type. When the Avengers show up, they fight for a bit, but after Alpha realizes Magneto's ill intent, he transforms the entire Brotherhood into babies and goes off to explore the cosmos, almost never to be seen again. He literally has 4 appearances in the entirety of Marvel history. It's not a great story, but it's certainly passable, and it sets up future stories. Sure, the Brotherhood will all be brought back to adulthood, but Magneto will remember his regression, and it remains a source of trauma for years to come. Although, annoyingly, only Magneto's return to adulthood is shown in X-Men comics. The rest of the Brotherhood are shown to have become adults again in issue 17 of The Champions, a comic almost nobody remembers, and those who do wish they didn't. Our second to last story takes place in Incredible Hulk issues 180 to 181, plus an excerpt from 182, and serves as an introduction to everyone's favorite Canadian badass, Wolverine. I'm not going to go into this one because I actually really love this story, issue 181 in particular, and I think it's more worthy of reading than recapping, so yeah. And we finish out our primer with Giant Size Fantastic Four number 4, which gives us our first introduction to Jamie Madrox, the Multiple Man. May seem like a weird thing to include, but Jamie will actually become a pretty major character in the X-Men mythos down the line before becoming a cool-as-hell private detective. For now, though, he just fights the Fantastic Four, and then Professor X comes and takes him away to cure his insanity and all that. It's whatever.
And that's the end. That's the first 4 epic collections, and basically all you need to know. You are now ready to start the Chris Claremont run. Hope you survive the experience. You'll get that joke later on. It's a whole thing.
And gonna cut off there because it gets lovey-dovey again. Yeah. It was a good relationship. I'll say that much. To anyone who watched this whole thing, thank you. I appreciate it. Put a lot of work into it. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it gave you information that you find valuable. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks for stopping by.